Let me start by saying congratulations, Karen. The book is gorgeous, folks. It has very pretty pictures and some nice stories and recipes to go around. And it really did make me very happy. So, a couple of questions around the book, but let me start by talking about recipes because they are an integral part of the book. So, of late, when we have been talking about recipes, we have been using the word authentic a lot, right? It has been going around authentic recipe, this authentic, and for some reason it bothers me a bit. What is authentic actually? Who's authentic? So what is your take on it?
Yeah, that's a very good question because I think the other day I was listening to something actually on the net and it said, what is authentic? Is it original or is it heritage? Now, heritage is something you're born with, and whether it's something from your memory or whether it's something that your mother did, it could be nostalgia. That to me is heritage. It doesn't have to be an authentic recipe. Origin, I don't know if it has much relevance, Monica. Origin could be the recipe 300 years ago. And does that have much relevance today? I don't know. So I think authentic, again, can be divided into two. Origin and heritage. And where I think heritage is important, I don't think origin is so important. So when people do authentic, part of it is history, part of it is also socio-cultural, it's also local, which I very much believe in. The 5 mile food thing, so you don't go very far for your food. All of that is also authentic.
It is. That's what, so authentic could mean different, right?
Yeah.
Even if you say heritage, for example, the same chicken curry or the same sambar, even if you belong to the same region, your house and my house could
Absolutely.
make very differently.
Absolutely.
So what really is authentic in that case?
There is none. In the book, for example, I've given 2 prawn curries from Goa. First of all, Goa also has this huge rift. You've got the Saraswat Hindu cooking and you have Catholic cooking, and they're very, very different. But even within, just say, Catholic prawn curries, you have different prawn curries. My family lived in Bombay. My grandmother lived in Goa. And so the curry that my great aunt made in Bombay was very different to my grandmother's curry in Goa. So, every family has different recipes, different of the same thing. But I think if you can at least, so I've mentioned 2.
Yeah.
Thepla, for example, from Gujarat. I have 2 friends, well, one is a relative, one's a friend, fabulous cooks of traditional, so let's use another word, traditional Gujarati food. But one lives in, I think I'm competing with him.
I know.
One lives in Calcutta. So what has happened is because she lives in Calcutta, she slightly tweaks the recipe because the atta is different, the methi is different, everything's like, the khand is different for undiyu, So she tweaks the recipe. So her tepla has a little besan in it. The tepla in Gujarat doesn't.
Doesn't have a basis.
So I think, a little bit of tweaking you have to do. If you, as I said in the book, if you live in Boston and you're trying to make undiyu, you'll have to get, I don't know, actually, maybe you get everything in Boston, I don't know.
Sometimes I feel you get more stuff in US than in India.
Yeah. Maybe
I mean,
you
all
get
across
surti papri, I
then
don't know.
yes.
Rajali bananas and all that kind of thing. But if you don't, I know people who use fava beans or use edamame. So, you have to adapt.
Yeah, so that kind of brings me to the next question. While I'm a strong believer, I think food makes a huge part of our cultural history. And I think if I may say so, maybe a major part, majority of segment. And it is important, I feel it's important for us to treasure recipes which have been passed across generations, the heritage in some ways that you're talking about. But times have changed, right? The produce that was available to our grandparents or great-grandparents is not available to us anymore.
Yeah.
The time our grandparents and grandmothers had to cook in the kitchen, or the way they cooked, like, together, right? The whole family will together, and there will be 8, 10 women sitting together and cooking meals and preserving stuff. That's not how we live life anymore.
No.
So how do you think we can preserve the recipes, the culture, the heritage, but still adapt it to our times?
I think, firstly, they have to be documented. We have, in India, have been very, very, very bad in documenting recipes. The Chinese are slightly better, the French are masters. Even the Italians are not so good. But the French are masters at documenting recipes. And therefore, French food has continued the world over and has spread because they are so good. Escoffier, all these people, they're so good at documenting recipes. In India, it's been an oral tradition. And so I think the first thing is to document. Once you document, then you can have, which is what I've tried to do in the book, then you can have, variations. What you said also about, there is a notable gap in the book in that I don't have Lucknowi recipes in there. I don't have many North Indian recipes. I don't have Punjabi recipes or UP. And when people ask me, I'm in Bangalore, so I can say what I like, but in Delhi, when they asked me, why don't you have them? I said, well, my knowledge of those regions is not so great, which is partly true, but partly I'm also on this sort of kind of mission to stop, this myth of Indian food being butter chicken, tandoori chicken, rajma chawal. I have opened 2 restaurants in London, both doing well. One 12 years ago, one recently, a year ago. And everyone says, oh, the British all know about curries, they know about food now. There are these, Atul Kochar and these fantastic restaurants. They do not. It is a lie. I can tell you that. I sat in the restaurant for a year, and people came in, and I was doing a white kind of korma, which I called Binny's chicken curry, for example, because it's the owner's mother's recipe. He came home every day, and there was this particular kind of very creamy chicken curry that his mother used to make. Chalo. People came in, and they refused to accept it. They just said, we want a red curry. And this is central London. This is not some... So, I think enough has been done of Lucknow because it's been documented. Yes. Enough has been done of the North because the restaurateurs have done that quite well in New York and Paris and London. The biryani is known, the tandoori chicken is known. So my crusade is to really get, I wouldn't say smaller, but other regional cuisines at least into the limelight now. So South Indian, Maharashtrian, and I've said in the book, I don't think Maharashtrian food is particularly glamorous.
Talk about it enough. Yeah. It's beautiful food.
Well, it's not glamorous, so it's never out there. But the snacks are great. Gujarati vegetarian food, West Bengal. Bengalis, for all their great, education and culture, have not written down recipes, which is, very strange. So I'm sure we have some Bengalis.
I'm going to stop you there and talk about written down recipes. I once read a quote somewhere there, I'm an Indian, I don't measure. So, isn't that part of why we're not able to document recipes? Even if
no culture used to measure.
If I go to my mother or my grandmother and ask them for recipes, there are people like you who are documenting. She'll tell me, ek chutki dal do, ek mutha dal do, right? That's how they explain recipes. So, I don't know whether we have food writers or aspiring people who want to write recipes here. Do you have any tips of how to actually translate that muthi into teaspoon, tablespoon, or whatever the measures are?
What you have to do, and that's a question we're going to ask tomorrow, what we're going to do is, is how, do food writers have to be cooks? And my opinion is yes. A food writer has to have a basic knowledge of cooking. If you don't have I'm not saying you have to be a great chef, but if you don't know,
you should know your way around kitchen.
And how can you translate it?
Yeah.
So, for example, the prawn balchao in the book was my grandmother's. My grandmother made fantastic prawn balchao. She told nobody the recipe. Not her daughters, not her daughter-in-laws, not her sons, nobody. So one day I just said to my mother, she'd already died by then, and I said to my mother, look, I would really like that recipe. It was quite fantastic. I tried various recipes. Google is useless when it comes to this, Tried the net. No, this is the problem. We have so much on the net, but a lot of it is useless, right? So I tried about 6 recipes. None of them were my grandmother's. So I asked my mother, and she went to my grandmother's maid was then working for my mother's sister-in-law. And so she went to her house. I pushed her there. And she sat there, and as she was making it, my mother was not exactly very precise either, but kind of wrote it down. Now she does this. And of course, it's also procedure.
Yep.
It's not just the recipe. It's at that point that you add dry prawn powder, or at that point that you add. So she wrote it down in whichever higgledy-piggledy way she could, which is great. And then I made it. And I made a couple of hits and misses because it was a bit higgledy-piggledy. And then I finally, it took me about 5 goes. And finally, I got that recipe works anywhere in the world.
Yep.
Provided you have Kashmiri chilies, provided you have coconut vinegar, and provided you have dry prawns, which I've made, it's quite specific. But I've been making them, when we have our launches. We had yesterday, we launched the book at the Leela here. We launched it in the Leela in Delhi. So I've been making 7 recipes from the book, and they were more or less accurate wherever we've done it.
Yeah,
So you have to write it down. It's like bakery. You have to write bakery down, yeah.
But that is hard for us in many ways. I mean, it doesn't come naturally to us. And that process of doing is something that maybe people like us who write about food is easier. But people who just want to document at home, to them, it's slightly tedious. So probably this is...
Well, Monika, I put it in teaspoons and cups because I think that's easier for the layperson. How many people weigh 222 grams,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes these chefs do it. It drives me insane. So, I think it's better to do cups, and because everybody's hand is going to be a little bit different. Maybe you want it spicier than me. So maybe you can
And that's the beauty of Indian recipes too, right? It's all adaptable.
It's fine.
Yeah.
But it gives you, at least it gives you a direction. True. Yeah? As opposed to no direction,
So one of the other things, apart from lovely recipes in the book, is also your... In a way, it's also a culinary memoir, right? It's not just a recipe book, though it has lovely recipes. So you trace your family history through certain 5 states. So how was that process? And is it, did you consciously go to those 5 states? I know you partly touched upon it before, but I mean, how was it writing about your personal history? How was your family took it, etc.? So.
Yeah, it turned out to be a bit more personal than I thought. I've been collecting recipes since I was 18. So when I first lived abroad and then here. So I have a lot of recipes. And luckily in the last 25 years, we've been putting it on a computer or on a backup or on Google Drive or whatever. Before that, it was all bits of paper, back of napkins in restaurants. I actually have some of those still. A little notebook I had when I studied in Paris with all the little recipes. So I've been collecting recipes for a long time. Then COVID happened.
Yeah.
So this is a COVID book. And I was at home in one place for at least 6 months, I think. And although I did go to London for the restaurant project, but I went whenever lockdowns were open. And I decided that this is what I was going to do. I spoke to an agent. They thought it was a great idea. And basically on intuition, I decided to write the book. And as it emerged into it became quite cathartic. So it emerged into a kind of personal memoir, culinary memoir, how I got into food, why I got into food, what were my influences. And then the 5 states I've chosen is purely because Gujarat, yes, I have a family connection, and I thought it was very important to have vegetarian and a large amount of vegetarian. Maharashtra, I live there, so I live in Bombay, Pune, so I had access there. Also, what's very important is the communities of Maharashtra. Yep. There's so many. Kerala, because I love Kerala and I go there all the time. Goa for the same reason. And West Bengal, because also I worked there a lot in the last 15 years. So I think the food of West Bengal is something very special. I love all the states that I've written about, but West Bengal food is really something quite unique. And I think it was just such a shame that the recipes really have not been written. There are some good Bengali books, but
actually.
I find they're very vernacular, They tell you about things that you only get in West Bengal. So if you don't get Gondoraj, if you don't get Big Tea, if you don't, you're a bit stuck. So those are the 5. And then Memorable Meals it's a chapter which has recipes from wherever I traveled. So if I traveled to Ladakh and tried something interesting, not easy to find good food in Ladakh, as anyone will tell you.
Unless you really like Ladakhi food, otherwise it's hard.
Otherwise it's hard. I mean, the meat is inedible.
Yeah.
It's so hard because it's so far up. Kurga had some great experiences. Chettinad I had great experiences. So then I put those in the memorable Parsi, because part of my family is Parsi. So, you know, they didn't fit into a region. So I didn't want to put Parsi in Bombay.
Yeah.
Because it's not fair. Parsis are not only in Bombay. So I put my Parsi recipes and Sindhi recipes and so on in the memorable.
One last question before we kind of open it up to audience if they have. See, while you write about your memories, about the food and the journey through these 5 states, an interesting thing comes up, and I have always kind of found it in writings which actually touch food, which is a whole socio-economic culture which goes at a part of the food, right? I mean, food is not food alone. Food is politics. Food is a lot more than, food is history. Food is a lot more than that, right? So was that bringing of into the book conscious effort, or it just kind of flow in? What do you think about it?
No, it wasn't really conscious, but I am very aware and I'm mindful of things like that. So when they're simple recipes, sometimes you don't, I remember Jigs Kalra one day, I said to him, Qureshi is also in the book, and I said, you know, I cannot have these Lucknowi recipes that take 2 weeks to find the ingredients, and then you need 7 slaves to make the dish, you know. We don't live like that anymore, and I'm not going to waste my time. I do believe in authenticity, as you said, but if the recipe is going to take more than a couple of hours, I turn the page.
Yep.
So I approach the book the same way, that, you know, I've chosen recipes that are easy to do and that are doable in mostly, so if it was a complicated biryani, I think there's only nihari in there, which is a bit complicated. But it's a great recipe, so that had to be in there. But if it's a complicated recipe with lots of ingredients that you're not going to be able to find, like Kolhapuri masala, for example, has about 20 ingredients plus. I've given you a recipe with about 10, because you're not going to find the other 10. It's not going to be the same as sitting in Kolhapur. But if I eat a mutton in Kolhapur, a spicy, not a pandaras or thing, but a spicy Kolhapuri mutton, I actually can't eat it today. It's got so much oil on it that I physically can't eat it. So I think you have to adapt a little bit.
Also, there are times and things for different places, right? I mean, if you are doing home cooking, it cannot, 90% of the time be like what you are eating in a restaurant, because it is a different process, and you run a restaurant, I had a kitchen, commercial kitchen. We all know that the way we process food in large bulk quantities cannot happen the same in your home kitchens. No. So I think that's what I had in terms of questions. We can open it up for audience for last 5 minutes. Does anyone have any questions for Karen?
Big push for health. I mean, it's been there for some time. So how do you address that in the book by way of maybe substitutes? So just as
No, I haven't given substitutes. What I've done is been mindful of the kind of recipes that I've put in there. So if they are recipes that are laden with oil, I've kind of left them out. So I've, for example, in the Maharashtrian chapter, I've mentioned a particular recipe which is spring onions and dry prawns. It's a very simple recipe. We have a young chap working in our office. He brings his dabba. Everybody shares their dabba every day. And one day he opened the dabba, and I happened to be in the office, and it was delicious. And I said, who's made this? And he said, my mother. Now, it was quite oily, but it was delicious. Just spring onions, ginger, garlic, and dry prawns, which of course gives it...
What's not to love?
Was not to love. And so I made it and put it in the book. Of course, she probably puts half a cup of oil. I put 2 tablespoons. So intrinsically, the new recipe that I've put is much healthier, and it's much light. And you see the green of the spring onions, which you don't in hers. So what I've done is that I've either slightly tweaked the recipe, or I've been mindful of not... now, for example, the 2 prawn curries I put in there, one is my great aunt's recipe. She never used oil. She never used oil, she never used onion, she never fried. So this is not like the book I did of lean cuisine, where I actually had no oil in the book. But it's not just oil. And of course, nowadays there's this big debate about good fats and bad fats and so on. So I've left coconut in there, but if something was really very fatty or took a lot of time, I've just left it out. I hope that answers your. There are not many desserts in the book.
Yeah, they aren't.
So
and I was looking
people
for
have
them.
said, yeah, there aren't many desserts, but that's for that reason, because I think Indian desserts are full of sugar. I'm a bit anti-white sugar. So I have put in desserts where there is coconut sugar or palm jaggery from the coast, but I haven't put in these cloy, koya, mawa kind of desserts.
So one of the thing also about the recipes in the book is a lot of them are actually, I mean, I write about food. I read about food a lot, and I still found recipes that I had not heard about. There is one recipe from Gujarat called kanki bhat, which is, I mean, it's so homely. I mean,
a very home recipe.
I don't think you'll ever find it in any restaurant, anywhere, or anywhere apart from Gujarati homes in particular, right? So those kind of recipes is what I feel memoirs and books like this bring to light, which
And also they're
get lost
very,
in the
very
wild.
simple to make.
Very simple to
Monica,
make.
they're
Yeah,
very,
simple to make.
So somebody who's not into cookery can open the book and say, oh, there's 4 ingredients. Maybe I'll try that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, ma'am. What's your favorite food?
Mine?
Yes.
Oh, it depends on my mood. It depends where I am. But on a daily basis, I'm staying in a hotel right now. I have a soup, that's for my own sanity. I have a soup every day. I have a salad every day. And sometimes a little bit of fish or grilled something. But that's what I eat every day. It's not necessarily my favorite. But my favorite is, in terms of foreign cuisine, I love Japanese food because I love the simplicity. And in terms of local things, apart from my soup, salad, everyday routine, I love Indian food, but I tend to avoid the gravies. But occasionally, yeah, I think khichdi is probably, when I come back from a trip, khichdi, or I have aloo matar, aloo matar chawal. That's my comfort food to go.
So what's your favorite recipe in the book?
Oh, that's a good one. I think the prawn balcha is a very good recipe, and it's close to my heart. So it's a nostalgic recipe. But there are so many interesting
I know it's
recipes.
a hard question to ask.
It's a hard one. I should actually think about this.
Yeah.
It's a hard one because there are so many. But I like the Maharashtrian ones because they're easy to make. Maharashtrian cuisine, as I said, is not a glamorous cuisine. And there are a couple of Bengali ones. There's doodh mach, which I love. Again, very, very simple. It's just panch foran and doodh and mustard oil. So it's not very difficult to make. And of course, you need really good katla or, rahu, or good river fish. But I think probably the vegetarian and the fish recipes are my favorite.
There are a zillion Indian biryanis.
Which is why I've avoided them, I think. Yeah.
Which biryani would you make if a customer said, Karan, make me a good Indian
I
biryani?
actually don't make biryani. I have very good chefs who make them, but I don't particularly make it myself because I don't have that skill set. I have got a mopla biryani from Kerala in the book, which is relatively easy, but honestly, I don't attempt it. In the restaurant in London, we do a kofti ki biryani, which is a little baby koftas, which is fantastic. It's a Lucknowi recipe. And I remember in Hyderabad, I will never attempt this. There was something I had many years ago called a safed biryani, or a safed pulao. Safed pulao. And I remember seeing how they put this koya in
That's
and then they
delicious.
chanoed it.
Wow.
And you need the 7 slaves for that. It's a difficult one, but it's delicious. I love to eat it, and if you read old books about Delhi cuisine, in the 18th, 19th century, they did, their pulaus were more elaborate than actually the biryani. So, they were all everything was cooked in stock. So while I think biryani is a fantastic thing, and, I personally will never attempt it because it's just, I can't even roll. Can I confess? I cannot make a roti. I can't. I can't. It looks like the map of India. So I can make very complicated things, but I can't roll a roti.
On that note, unfortunately, we're out of time. We can continue the conversation at the Grand Ballroom, where
That's fine,
Karen
that's
will
fine.
sign her book.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.